Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Bailey. I'm the co-founder of From Day One, a forum on corporate values. And I'm looking forward excuse me. I'm looking forward to hosting today's webinar as soon as I can get my notes in front of my face. Before I do that, though, I want to ask you guys a favor. This has been a big year of change for everybody. And just like you and basically everyone in the world over here at From Day One, we work every day to process and try to understand all the change that's happening in the workplace. So we can better create content like this webinar, content like our conferences, the journalism that we do. So we've put together a series of surveys on a bunch of topics that we think are going to be relevant to you and to your job and your job description. And we really want to know what you think. During this webinar, I'm going to share a couple links with you. These are straightforward, anonymous reader surveys. There's one on HR leadership. There's one on age diversity. So I am putting that into the chat right now. You can click on it right now. Go ahead and fill it out while I'm finishing up this intro. It won't take long. Look out for the other survey. That'll be during the break in about half an hour. So click on the link, get it in your browser. I'm going to keep talking, fill it out. It's really short. It's just a couple questions that you, as a professional, as an HR professional, will definitely have some opinions on. We'd love to hear those. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We spend a lot of time staring into screens, especially over the past pandemic influenced year. We are staring into and often speaking into screens. We don't often get to hear from you guys. And so we really would appreciate it. We'd love to hear what you guys think. We can create stuff that hopefully will be even more informative for you. So on to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be exploring a topic that focuses on parental stress and what employers can do to support the well-being of working parents. Our title for today's session is Parents Under Pressure: How to Ensure Their Well-Being at a Time of Historic Stress. As families have continued working at home, schooling at home, stuck at home, the pandemic has put unique burden on parents, especially women. How are they coping after more than a year in the crisis? What's the toll on everyone's well-being? How can the exodus of women from the workforce be reversed? What strategies can employers put into action to help reduce parental stress, not only on an immediate basis, but in terms of long-term shifts, corporate policy, investments into maternity, parental benefit programs, and what are the insights onto ensuring the success of those programs, both at home and at work? Our sponsor today is Ovia Health. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them. Ovia Health is the leading women's and family health technology company with over 15 million members. In this webinar, we're going to explore how employers can leverage a once in 100 years type of public health crisis to drive positive change in health outcomes for working parents. A couple logistical items. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand soon after this event. You can look out for an email that'll come from us in about 24 hours. It'll have a link. The email will also have info on professional development credits for the session from the Society of Human Resource Management, that's SHRM, SHRM, and HRCI. Also, look out for a written account of this conversation that'll be on our website at fromday1.co. That's FROMDAYONE.co, where you can find out about this and other sessions as well. In about an hour, that's 3 p.m. for those of us on the East Coast, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, including right this second. We'll get to those at the 1 hour mark. Now, with all of that out of the way, thanks for listening, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Caroline Ronchik, the careers editor of Business Insider and former senior editor of Employee Benefit News, a workplace benefits trade publication. Thanks so much, Caroline, for hosting, and over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Welcome everyone to today's discussion on working parents during the pandemic. We have a lot of great things we're going to talk about during this hour and a half. But first, I just wanted to get us started by having all of our panelists just briefly introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do. Gina, do you want to start us off?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Nebasar. I'm the Chief of Product at Ovia Health. Ovia is a digital health platform for women and families. We provide clinical programs that span the full spectrum of family care, from reproductive health to parental well-being. Millions of people track their health and lives with Ovia every single day, and Ovia applies evidence and empathy to help them have a better outcome, whether that's having a healthier pregnancy or navigating this great journey of pandemic parenthood. I'm also an Ovia mom of 2 and pregnant with my 3rd and working from home with no formal childcare in sight. So this topic is very near to me. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for joining today to discuss this important health topic. And then also forgive me if my little ones come storming through the door at any point, which they might.
Diana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, a pleasure to be here. My name is Diana Geofroy. I am the HRBP for Colgate Mexico. I work in the subsidiary, which is the biggest subsidiary for Latin America. We have almost 7,000 employees, a lot of parents. I am a mom of a proud 10-year-old who's actually in class right now. So we've been working in this subject for a long, long time, for basically a year. So happy to share and learn about what other companies are doing too.
Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Lisa Adukia. I work for Gap Inc. Based out of San Francisco, California. Gap Inc. owns and operates 7 different clothing brands. So we have about 140,000 employees spread out over roughly 30 countries. So I personally am focused on communications and engagement for all of our Total Rewards programs. So that, of course, is where benefits are. And benefits is definitely a hot topic throughout the pandemic, especially with childcare and parental benefits. I'm also the co-chair of our Gap Parents Employee Resource Group, which has proven to be a very unique offering during this time period. And I am the very proud and tired parent of a 4-year-old precocious little one. So that's me.
Emily, you want to go ahead and jump in?
Thank you. My name is Emily Sterling, and I work for Intermountain Healthcare. We're a healthcare network that spans from Nevada, Utah, up into Idaho, and we have both hospitals and clinics. And I am part of the human resource team and responsible for looking after the social determinants of health, which is all the things that affect where you're born, live, work, and play for our 40,000 employees.
Awesome, thank you. And then Kelly.
Hi, everybody. I am Kelly Young. I work for KinderCare Education. I have the honor of leading the talent investment and culture team for that organization. Gina, we have childcare options for you, so we can talk after this. But we operate about 2,000 locations nationwide if you include our Champions brand, which is our before and after school program. It's a little iffy right now. It's more of a digital school and a lot of virtual school in a lot of states. But we operate, we employ about 30,000 teachers and 95% female workforce. So we actually deal with this on both ends. We have a lot of teachers who are working mothers, obviously, and a corporate environment as well that is 95% female. So we're dealing with it from both ends of the spectrum, but super happy to be here and honored to be a part of the panel.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. So to get started, I think it'd be really useful to talk about some of the challenges that have affected working parents. What are some of the things you've personally heard from parents? And I know many of you are parents yourself, but maybe what are some of the challenges that you've personally experienced during the pandemic?
If you want, I can start. I think parents are tired. We are very tired. And the pandemic arrived, we were not prepared for it. So we've been working 12, 14 hours, and there is no end to when work ends and when your home part starts. So I think parents are very tired. So at least in the company, we've been working to really make sure that we maintain a working schedule and people have time to take pauses between Zooms and between Hangouts, and they have time to eat. We survey and we realized that 80%, almost 80% of the team were not having lunch because they were going from one meeting to another meeting. And the other part is we're encouraging people to take time off. I think those are one of the feedback that we received from the parents is like they need some time off, and that could be vacations or taking a day just to be with the kids or taking a day to arrange. In the beginning, it was very stressful for parents to start to arrange all of the online classes. So basically we did arrangement with Office Depot to get them computers, we shipped the shares so they could be working more comfortable. And I think one of the most important things is just listening to understand what are the needs and how we as a company can help out in that process.
I can add a couple of things. What we're seeing and feeling, I think, is a couple different things to add to that. Yes, parents are tired, but I think especially initially, we all just kind of scrambled and everybody went into survival mode. And so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to really connect and partner and brainstorm ideas off of other parents, because everybody just immediately just hunkered down into survival mode. And so I think what we've been seeing is definitely the fatigue from that, especially as now people are starting to come up and reach out and talk to others and find out, oh, what have you been doing? How have you been getting through Zoom school? Like, how have you been, podding up, or whatever the term that people are using. And part of that survival mode has also introduced a lot of deferred care. So people aren't getting their regular health checkups. They're also not getting their regular massages or chiropractor appointments or manicures or pedicures or haircuts. Like, all of those self-care and healthcare needs are being deferred. And that's really starting to take a toll on parents as well. And so I think that's something that we need to be really mindful of as things start opening up and people's risk thresholds start getting a little bit more manageable.
Going into the pandemic, I think that we saw that parents in the workforce were already experiencing what we call scarcity, this idea that there is a limited resource, whether that's time or finances. And then the pandemic came along and just stretched it even thinner. And we know that when there's scarcity, it affects our ability to actually function and to respond to different stressors, because our bandwidth is just pulled so tight. So we saw parents who were already at this stretched breaking point, and then we added the pandemic, and then we added isolation that I think others have talked about, where their normal social connections, where they would get some release and some relief from the stress, was no longer there. And then I don't know how everyone else has been across the nation, but we also had some natural disasters that occurred that people were then having to juggle into the mix. And again, that just shortens the bandwidth that people are able to, have to apply to just everyday stuff like work when they have so many other things going on.
I think, I'm lucky enough that my kids are grown up, so I haven't had to balance it, but I do have some members on my team who, we're a pretty kid-friendly environment as it is, but what we're really dealing with and what we're hearing is nobody feels like they're doing anything well, right? And that in and of itself is a really difficult thing for women to have to endure. So self-care, Lisa, is something that we're really focusing on as well. But just, connecting mothers with one another and helping people understand that they are not alone in this. And, that they're doing a great job on all fronts is a really important conversation that we're having within our organization today.
And these trends that you're all mentioning too are something we're seeing nationally across the millions of people that Ovia serves. So the pandemic is influencing every aspect of a parent's life, their care delivery, their access to just fundamental resources. We've done this study with the March of Dimes that showed that as many as 30% of prenatal care appointments were being canceled or move online amid the pandemic. We saw preventative care, pediatric well care also being impacted. Most alarmingly, it's been the mental health that we've seen affect parents. We have a behavioral health program within Ovia, and part of that is delivering digital depression risk screeners, one of which is the Edinburgh Depression Risk Screener, which is one of the most commonly used tools to assess perinatal depression amongst new mothers. And amid the pandemic, when we compared pre-pandemic scores versus post-pandemic scores, there were increases in severe, moderate depression levels, and it was affecting different populations disproportionately. So BIPOC moms, specifically Black mothers, were experiencing, or we noticed a trend in experiencing higher rates of suicidal thoughts compared to their white peers. And we've done numerous other surveys amongst our parents just to show they're losing emotional support during this time. And they're not only worried about financial security and their, elderly parents getting sick and all of these pressures, but also that their family well-being is at risk.
How do you create an environment at work where parents feel comfortable coming forward and talking about these challenges? Obviously, a lot of these are very serious, very personal things, but they are, things that employers can help people with. So, how do you create that kind of a space for working parents?
What we've been doing is creating conferences about the specific issues that we get feedback on stress, on burnout, on grief, for example. Unfortunately, in Mexico, the death toll is very, very high. So basically, every member of each family has a person they know or a person from that family that passed away due to COVID. So making it like acceptable to talk about it is one of the areas that have worked for us very well. And in small groups, so people can interact with each other and they can relate on situations. So again, putting the subject on top of the table, I think is easier for people to see that they're not alone. And also we providing an employee assistance program for the employee and the family. Again, we have seen that people don't use it very much because, again, of this stigma of calling to that program, even though it's confidential. But we have seen that once we have a conference, after that conference, you see more people calling the line. So that's what we've been doing so far.
Some of the things that we've been doing too, and certainly it's not perfect, and it can be very different depending on the team and the type of job function that you're in. But some of the things that we've been doing to try to help enable the conversation and encourage it is having our senior leaders, have a child walk in on a meeting. It's not always planned, but you try to embrace it when it happens. But also just having a moment to recognize that we are living through times that no one has ever experienced before, and we're figuring it out together. And it's not going to be perfect, and it's not always going to be neat. So trying to embrace that. So we encourage people to turn off their cameras. A lot of times there's things going on in the home that people maybe don't feel comfortable having on display for all of their coworkers. So we encourage camera off days. We also try to encourage limiting meetings to where you only need to be in person. So if you're just listening in, you can listen later. You don't have to attend live. So that encourages flexibility. So when people are juggling multiple things during the day, they can manage their time more effectively. We also have an EAP program that is underutilized, but we try to escalate or elevate it into the conversation as frequently as possible. So talking about our enhanced family benefits that are available, talking about crisis care, childcare reimbursements, and the employee assistance program. By doing regular communications about those enhanced benefits, it gives leaders an opportunity to talk about, hey, these things are available. Let's see, maybe someone on the team needs them, or how can we take advantage of them? It gives an opportunity to talk about it. Because I know a lot of people still are feeling like they need to apologize when the child or the dog crashes their Zoom meeting. And, when our work is our life and it's all intertwined, we do need to remove that guilt or that feeling of needing to apologize for our life experiences. And that's still very relevant.
One of the things that we're really proud of at KinderCare is what we call the culture calendar. So it's something that we put into place just to keep people connected. And because we're such a high female workforce, right? Most women in our organization are mothers. And so it's helped people stay connected virtually through things like a story time. And we have somebody read a story, and children are invited to kind of this cultural event. And we have, multiple opportunities a week to keep people really connected. It's been something that has kept our engagement scores up this year and kept us really proud of the environment and the culture that we've created at KinderCare in the last few years. But it's also brought women to the table with kids in the background running around, to your point, Lisa, and everybody else's, right? Like we all have dogs or kids or husbands. I mean, I've had my husband cross behind me a few times and I'm like, you're in my office looking for things. I'm like, everybody can see you. So I think just having that casual, nature. And I love that, your senior leaders are doing that kind of intentionally just to make a point, which is really great. But that is something I feel like every organization can put into place pretty easily in this remote work world that we're in, just to kind of keep people connected.
Gina, are there any trends you're seeing right now as far as, who's delivering the care or like caregiving in the home?
Oh, absolutely. It's, I think the caregiving responsibilities are predominantly falling on the women. It's impacting their mental health, social health, and also their ability to continuously advance their careers. So currently today, about 1 in 4 women are considering leaving the workforce or reducing their hours pretty significantly in response to a lot of these challenges that we're talking about. There's been over 2 million since women leaving the workforce since last February. And again, this is not, it's disproportionately impacting women of color, Black mothers, Asian mothers, Hispanic mothers. We engage people, millions of people, and we're seeing similar statistics amongst our population as well. We surveyed about 18,000 parents and realized that 42% of them said they didn't have the childcare that they need. And as a result, 75% of them were considering making major changes to their careers. So on top of, again, the financial pressures, the pandemic pressures, they're also worried about financial security. This is so alarming because the absence of all these female leaders, because we're carrying the domestic burden in addition to our professional duties, this is going to have consequences for years to come. Fewer working women today will mean fewer leaders tomorrow. And we're essentially threatening a gender gap amongst an entire generation of women, which again, it's not just their financial well-being we're impacting their overall family well-being.
Yeah, I know last year something like more than 2 million women left the workforce specifically. And a lot of them, like you said, did cite, caregiving challenges at home as one of the reasons why they decided to leave the workforce. So with this in mind, how can companies better support working women specifically and particularly mothers?
Being close to them. I think we have to listen no more than ever. Again, we have the flexibility problems. We have to have flexible benefits, but I think we have to be open to listen. One of the things that we're doing with the managers at this moment is just have casual conversations to understand what is happening, what have changed. At least in Mexico, grandparents play a big role in helping families with their kids. And that situation has been reversed. A lot of the grandparents has been hit with COVID. A lot of them have passed away. And now the kids have to bring the grandparent that have been left to live with them. So that is a financial situation. It changed your financial situation. It changed your family dynamics. So again, I think we have to understand every family have lived the pandemic in a different way. So just understanding how we can support that, it would be helpful for the teams.
And to your point, like listening, because it's so different. I mean, every family that you talk to has a different set of circumstances going on at home. So companies can't expect to deploy a one size fits all. There's not one modified schedule that will work for everyone or one meeting cadence that will work for everyone. So I think having regular pulse checks on where employees are at, like not only physically where are they doing their work at, but what do they need to help themselves feel rested and feel productive and feel positive, not just feel like you're getting your deadlines done, because we can all burn that candle at both ends and get things done. But are you feeling rested? Are you feeling valued? Are you feeling seen? Are you feeling connected? We need to ask those questions, and we need to be prepared to listen and modify our working protocols to be able to meet people's needs and be flexible.
I agree with you, Lisa. And one of the things that I think, that you're just triggering for me is listening to women and also asking them what is the best schedule for them. So, thinking about flex schedules in a new and different way. I know we've probably all done that to some degree in our role. But I remember, having a conversation with a working mother when we were trying to figure this out early on. And she was like, honestly, I just want a 4-4-4. I want to wake up, work 4 hours, virtually, school my kids for 4 hours and then, work for 4 more hours. And so just thinking through like some of these ways you can get creative to support mothers and, really, approach it in a one size fits one manner, so that everybody feels like, we're meeting them where they are. I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And I know some jobs, it's easier to do that than others, but just really asking your workforce, what it is that they need is an important part of the conversation.
And I think along with those things that we can do at work, I think it's also creating resources for when a parent needs to take time off to either take care of their family, or maybe it's parental leave. But when they take time off and work just continues to stack up while they're gone, I think that adds to the stress when they then return, and it affects their ability to be productive. So creating teams and projects that are structured in such a way that the work is able to continue while that person is gone, and then having kind of a re-onboarding type activity if someone's away from work for long enough that there's been a significant change, so that they can easily transition back into the project where they left.
Such a just not only listening and then also investing in what you've heard, investing behind the behavioral health benefits, the flexibility, as Kelly mentioned. And then also I think making these investments for the long term, they make such a louder noise when parents know they can rely on their employer, not just during the pandemic, but afterwards. I think a lot of parents, there's so much uncertainty today. To just look around and say, okay, what are my childcare benefits, not just during the pandemic, but what is it going to look like next year when my infant might not be able to have a vaccine yet? I think this pandemic has shown us that when people don't have reliable, trustworthy childcare that they can afford, they can't work. And they're really looking to set that louder signal of, what's my benefits, not just today, but what's it going to look like in 2022?
One thing I do want to just add real quick there too is I think many of us deal with a lot of employees, a lot of large groups, and so we're looking at the stats. I mean, my company is also predominantly women. I think we're over 70% women, and but one of the things we have heard from our parents group is that there are some dads that are taking on the caregiving burden. We do have several same-sex couples, so there are several two-dad households. So when I mention make sure that we're listening, we need to make sure that we're listening to all of our parents and all of our caregivers, because you also don't know necessarily the age demographic that's going to be in that sandwich generation that might need to be taking care of their elderly parents and their children, or even maybe their children's children. So thinking about caregiving as this very complex, nuanced piece of our workforce, and understanding and listening how it impacts each of our employees differently and being ready to respond, I think is something that we need to be ready to do, and try to use very inclusive, gender neutral language where possible. And I think we are talking about the impact of women on the workforce because of statistically it is so large, but just being mindful that the caregiving dilemma is broader than just women.
I think Nick's going to jump in real quick.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. And I'd like to just remind anyone that's joined in midstream, this is From Day One, and we are exploring parents under pressure, how to ensure their well-being at a time of historic stress. Our sponsor for today's webinar is Ovia Health. And as promised, I'm sharing a link to the other From Day One survey here. It's in the chat. If you're able to click and share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. This is a really interesting topic. It's multi-generational workforces. And these panelists would love to hear from you too. You can submit your questions at any time for the panelists to answer. That's going to happen in about half an hour. That's using the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your Zoom client. And you can ask questions anytime, including now, and we'll start to get to those at the top of the hour. And now back to you, Caroline. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nick. Lisa, I thought you made some really good points there. And I think too, one thing that's really interesting and it may be a unique situation during the pandemic is supporting parents who are returning to work from parental leave, like right after they've had a child. So, I'd love to open that to the panelists. How do you support those parents who are returning to work during this very challenging time and, after they've had a child, which could also be a very new experience for some of them?
In our case, it's having the one-to-one conversations. You have parents that will actually they want to go back because they already took the time, and some other parents that they're too attached at that moment and they don't want to go back. I think you have to have that conversation. Maybe you work on a half schedule. Maybe you work you always in a different time slot. Being virtually, I think that helps because at least in Mexico, you avoid the transportation from back forward to one place to another. So I think it's just having that conversation and understanding what the family need at that moment, and then trying to make that happen.
We've also added a couple of parent platforms where it helps not only the parents that are returning back start, learning about what's going on in the workforce, so to get them caught up so they can onboard back in easier. But also there's some great articles in there and some resources around just the emotional and mental and hormonal toll that you might be shifting and adjusting as you're going back to work and modifying your schedule. There's also in our parents portal, we also have resources for leaders because you may be a new leader or earlier in your career where you haven't had to deal with a parent returning to the workforce and you're not quite sure what you're allowed to say or how to say it or what questions to ask. So I think making sure that we have resources for our leaders and our supervisors and our HR teams and just providing the resources out there, not assuming that everybody knows what to say and when to say it. And one of the other things we do is as parents are returning, we connect them into our Get Parents network as well. So they have a chance to talk with other parents who have recently returned. We've been trying to figure out how to create little cohorts of, so if you have a baby that's born this year, you're within a little cohort, you can immediately be connected with that group. We haven't quite perfected that yet. So I'd love anyone's tips on if they got a good way to do that.
I love that. The other thing we're trying to do, and I don't know if you all are kind of in this boat with me, but just erase the stigma that you can't talk to somebody on maternity leave. You can't even have a conversation, right? It doesn't feel good when you go have a baby and you're, experiencing this huge life change and your best friends at work are scared to reach out to you because of, the way we've treated FMLA in the past. So really trying to just kind of erase some of those boundaries and stay connected with people. It's really been something that has been a big kind of mantra of ours, in the last year, because connection is just so important and that's what we keep hearing. So even in those moments, how are we staying connected to our mothers and making sure they know, that we care about how they're doing and we want to see pictures of their baby, all of those things that, every new mother wants to feel or parent in general, right? To your point, Lisa. So really just staying connected is, it sounds like it's becoming my theme.
I think so too, Kelly. So in Ovia, we have a parenting wellbeing program. And then every postpartum mom has access to a lactation counselor, a mental health social worker. And during this program, you think parents are so busy during that time, but on average, they're coming back over 70 times a month to Ovia. So they're looking not just for the expert support, but also the psychosocial support that you were talking about of just how are you doing today? How do you feel about breastfeeding? And then Lisa, you mentioned the manager support as well. So Ovia has benefited about 2,000 employers And so we provide that one-on-one support to each person, but also we have those resources for the managers as well. Everything to navigate the announcement, I'm pregnant. So the first words that come out of your mouth are congratulations, as opposed to, oh no, how are we going to cover for you? But also through that return to work. And that's really had to evolve throughout the pandemic, because as Diana mentioned, every single person is different. I had 3 people so far that reported to me that went out on leave, and I can say each person, it was a different, once I had the conversation, it was a very different attitude for how they felt about returning to work during the pandemic.
Let's talk a little bit about mental health and mental health care. You know, burnout's really high right now. It's high among parents as well. Gina, I know you have some data you can talk about on that. Like, what are you seeing as far as mental health?
I shared earlier, so we've been monitoring trends that have been emerging through depression risk screeners, and the trends are pretty alarming. Pre versus post-pandemic stress levels, moderate to severe depression risks, even suicidal ideation increasing amongst cohorts of our members. So it's a pretty alarming trend that we're witnessing. The increased pressures, everything that we've mentioned today, and also just a disproportionate effect on populations, whether you're an essential worker, you need to go in, or even if you're at home and you don't feel like you have these amazing HR and benefits leaders that are there to support them. You know, not everyone is as lucky to be at these organizations where they feel so supported and listened to.
So how do employers better support parents' mental health during this time?
I guess all the things we've been talking about. We need to encourage people to get help, to talk to someone. I think that's really hard, especially when everybody's already so overburdened with what's going on, to try to take a moment to say you might need help. Or, you know, another challenge is there are a lot of people who have it a lot worse. So why should I complain? You know, why should I need to get help when I know so many other people have it so much worse? So I think employers need to make sure and encourage the resources that are there. Have people that are comfortable talking about when they got help and how they got help, how it helped them. I think hearing an individual say, you know, wow, I was really struggling with anxiety and I didn't even realize how much it impacted me. Hearing somebody you know say that and talk about the resources that they used is so much more impactful than me as a HR communicator to just be like constantly reminding people that we have benefits available. So if I know somebody who used it and it helped them, I'm going to be much, much more likely to use it. The opposite side, though, is if I know somebody who reached out and tried to get help and they couldn't get help because the resource was not available, the wait times were too long, the scheduler never called them back. As professionals, benefit professionals, employers need to have a way to receive that feedback so we can act on it, because it only takes one bad experience to shut that door for multiple people to try to use that resource. So, so making sure that you have a mechanism to get feedback about how the resources helped and then share that feedback with employees, I think is really, really important for parents to be able to feel like they have the not only the resource that's available, but that the valuable use of their time, if they're going to make that time to make that call, it needs to be something that's going to be a good use of their time.
And I will add having that casual conversations to see how your team is doing and be open to listen how they are feeling in a particular moment. We're encouraging managers to do that. That when you're having a one-to-one conversation, not everything has to be related to work. Just check in to see how they're doing, of course, respecting privacy and everything. But it's important now more than ever to do that, because again, some people will come to you, some other people will not even elevate the conversation. So those are the kind of things. And to your point, Lisa, I think providing testimonials is very, very helpful, because again, you understand that you're not alone in that situation.
Making it more of a workplace issue than an individual issue. And another popular thing we've been doing amongst our employers is we'll actually send virtually our registered nurses and our experts in everything from the COVID vaccine to breastfeeding to the parents groups to moderate discussions among them. So they've found it valuable that they could have a clinical expert moderate a discussion at a parents group to help people openly talk about these mental health concerns that they're having, know that they're not alone, know that it's valued. In addition to the one-on-one, I thought has been incredibly valuable for a lot of the groups that we support.
At Intermountain, we're really trying to normalize, I think like everyone here, normalize conversations about mental health so that it's not something that someone has to take on alone. And we've got a 4-pronged approach to that. One is this going home checklist that was adapted from a National Health Service over in Great Britain. This tool that allows parents and employees to acknowledge what went well during a shift, what didn't go well, and start to create that separation before, at the end of their workday, before they go home and engage with their loved ones. Some days it's easier to do that than on others, but we're encouraging people to start practicing it so that they get better at it each time. And then checking in with employees as you go. And we've got 2 ways to do this. One, they're peers checking in on peers, that lived experience of a parent helping a parent or a nurse helping a nurse when they're having a hard day. It's a great, they're the people who are going to notice when someone's struggling, and making sure that those peers, when they're checking in, have resources if something is elevated, in the level of concern, so that they can make a referral to resources like our employee assistance program or other behavioral health resources out in the community. And we've really tried to make those more visible for everyone, and then adding leaders in as a component so that in addition to peers checking on peers every single day, check in with your peer before they go home, but we've got leaders doing rounding, and we've created guides for them so that they have in front of them, here's the signs of burnout, and if you see this in your caregiver, we modeled some conversations that they might have, because I think some leaders are worried that they'll hear something maybe from a parent that they don't know how to solve. Well, they don't have to solve the problem, but connect people to resources. And sometimes for parents who are going through a stressful workday, they go home and they're homeschooling their kids or doing whatever, preparing dinner, and then trying to just sleep a little bit before they come back again. Scheduling time with a counselor to get mental health resources is really hard. So giving our leaders permission to give their employees permission to step away during the day to schedule an appointment with EAP has been really powerful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, too, and one of the things you all sort of touched on a little bit earlier in the discussion is, making sure parents have time for self-care and time for themselves throughout the day, which can be very, very hard right now. So how are all of you encouraging working parents to take that time out of their day for themselves and for some self-care?
One of the things we do is we are offering opportunities to do that. So we have a fit studio that's actually run out of one of our offices, and it's been converted to being completely virtual now. So we have meditation classes or yoga classes or high intensity interval training classes. So a variety of classes that actually are during the day, throughout the day. So we're encouraging people to not only sign up for those classes and attend them live if they can, but then they're also available for playback. So if they can't attend them or the timing doesn't work, they're available for them on demand. And then also just, again, encouraging people to feel like they can leave their camera off. I think just sometimes just giving that permission that you can leave your camera off is helpful too, because people don't feel like they have to be on. They're going to be more likely to maybe take care of some things that they need to, or if they need to hold a sick child or be helping with homework while they're listening to a meeting, just giving them the mental, I hate to use the word permission, but it almost is. It's like you're letting them know it's okay, and you're going to trust them to be adults and to get their work done as they can, and accept that their life is happening at the same time. So creating a space during the day, offering opportunities frequently, and reminding them that it's available and it's okay.
One of the things that we're doing is working on meetings. Our biggest complaint is the number of meetings that people have to attend. And sometimes either they don't belong in that meeting, or they can just have the minutes and just act upon the minutes. So basically working on that process so we can reduce the number of meetings. And also we're working with each department on these things we can stop doing, because people say, well, basically either in a meeting and after the end of the day is when I get time to do my day-to-day job. So basically stopping things that don't add value. And again, that's being a conscious exercise in each department to, again, let people have free time at the end of the day. And as Lisa provide all kinds of activities, yoga, running groups that they can do virtually on demand, and again, conferences. So, and emphasizing again, the respect of the schedule over the weekends and outside schedules.
We also like to celebrate self-care. So we have what we call our Live Well program, which is all of those things that are self-care: exercise, meditation, mindfulness. And at the beginning of every meeting, there is a moment that is set aside for, and maybe up to 5 minutes, set aside for someone to share a self-care, essentially a Live Well story. And that has been great in creating that as part of our culture. So it's something that is expected, it's something that is celebrated, and it's something that you look forward in hearing what other people are doing to take care of themselves, because it gives you ideas about what you can do to support yourselves.
I think the biggest thing for us is just modeling self-care, right? So as leaders in the organization, I often am giving feedback to leaders in the organization. Like if you're working from, 6 to 9, your employees are going to think they need to work from 6 to 9 also. So how are we modeling and kind of taking that on? And I think, it sounds very obvious, but we're all probably guilty of it, right? So obviously we're doing a lot of the other things as well, but I think it's really important just to keep your senior leadership team focused on self-care and talking about it, and also, mental health in general.
Great. Just as a reminder, our Q&A is coming up in about 13 or so minutes, so keep submitting your questions. I see some good ones coming in. But yeah, one of the big themes that I think I'm hearing from all of you throughout this conversation is flexibility is incredibly important for parents in general. We've seen a lot of companies now saying they're going to move to hybrid or fully remote work models, which will obviously allow for more flexibility for parents. So, what does this mean long term? Is this a positive thing?
I think yes, the flexibility is definitely a positive thing, but it has to meet all employee needs, and not just the exempt managers, not just the parents, not just the ones right out of college, right? So the nature of flexibility is going to be very complicated, and you can it's impossible to meet everybody's needs, obviously, but to have a flexible workforce that's tailored to the needs of the majority of your employees, I think, is a start, but also recognizing that there are going to be some people that want to be in the office and that need to have a workspace outside of their home. So being able to support that working model as well, and making sure that the flexibility isn't limited to just one social, economic, geographic group, right? So we need to be able to have flexible schedules for our distribution center workers, for our call center workers. So having flexible schedules permeate every area of our business, I think it's an absolutely positive thing. I mean, we're in a global environment where everybody's in a different time zone. People are used to getting, I think my doorbell just rang for a delivery. People are used to getting deliveries happening around the clock. So there's no reason why we can't modify our work schedules to be around the clock as appropriate to meet the needs for our different employee groups.
And again, I will add that it would be try and error. It will not be the same from one industry to another. And I also think it's important how you're going to maintain your culture during that process, because it's very different when everybody was in the same place, working in the same location. And now you will have people working in different locations and some people only working remotely. So that is something that is important for us and HR to take into consideration. How we're going to maintain that culture and how will that look in different situations.
And also how this translates over to not just the workplace culture, but also in the benefits that we provide them. So there's been a lot of talk around virtual care and the adoption accelerating. We joke that in a couple of years, no one will be saying virtual care; it'll just be called care. But we need to see that, we need to see that in the digital health programs we provide. That people are going to want more flexible care for their families in addition to workplace flexibility. One thing we introduced this year was remote monitoring devices for our pregnant populations, managing their risk for hypertension and preeclampsia, helping them understand their risks in between those and get daily support in between those episodic appointments with their OB. And I'm hopeful that that's what we'll see post-pandemic as well, is not just a change in the workplace culture, but also just increased flexibility in care delivery. As I can't imagine driving 20 minutes and sitting in an office and waiting 20 more minutes to receive a preventative care appointment post-pandemic.
So we've touched on a number of different things and different themes throughout this discussion so far, but I'd love to ask each one of you, what do you think is the biggest lesson that employers have learned over the past year during the pandemic? And in turn, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned? Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different.
I'll say we have broken a lot of paradigms that we thought we couldn't work this way, or this is not possible. And I think with the pandemic, we all became very creative and very innovative, and we adapted to the circumstances. So I think something like this had to happen, and we have accelerated digital transformation. We are more agile. So I just think is how a crisis also has something good that you can take from. I personally, is flexibility. What I've learned is that you have to be flexible, and you have to find ways to work with what you have, even though you worked in the past in a certain pattern, but this is a new pattern and you have to adapt and you have to work with what you have.
I would say two things. I mean, I think it completely blew up the myth that remote work is impossible. And I think in every industry, there was still some little pocket somewhere where somebody believed you physically had to all be in the office at the same time. And so I think we've seen just unparalleled levels of creativity and resourcefulness with people and making it work. And so I think that's been an incredible lesson learned. And another thing, I think we finally killed this concept of work-life separation. Like, I remember when I first started working, people would say you leave your personal life at the door. Like, that's impossible, and it never was possible. But that was a mindset that used to be prevalent in the workplace. And so I think the fact that now we have to embrace the whole being, the whole person, and understand that the whole being shows up to work. I think that's been a gift that the pandemic has given us that I really hope we learn to embrace and continue to embrace.
I think I've learned, and we've learned that, and as we pointed out here, families come in different shapes, different sizes, and with different needs. And some families went into the pandemic with more resources than others. And it's affected how well some of the programs that are available, out in the community, or even, I think we've talked about some of the benefits have been, more helpful to some groups than others. And we've had to flex and adjust. And moving forward, I think we're going to continue to see that as we emerge from the pandemic, there are going to be some families that are able to get back on track and will not need very much support. And there will be some families that will need to engage in adding some additional benefits like financial wellness to really help them be okay and get everything back on track after the pandemic.
I think for us, I echo everything everybody's saying. I think we can all agree on all of these things. But for us, as an organization, it's really been working cross-functionally in a much different way to support. I mean, you can imagine, and everybody's had their challenges through pandemic. But as a early childhood education company, we closed and put 30,000 teachers on standby with 1 week's notice, right? Like. And so when you think about that and then opening them all back up, a month later, and just the number of humans in the organization that had to come together cross-functionally in a new and different way, breaking down silos that can happen. I think, the positive side is that we support our centers and hence our children and families, the most important people to us, so much more efficiently and so much more holistically than we did before. And I think, that's something that we will take with us out of this. I don't know if you can go back into, once you kind of see this magic that's happening. So I think there's a lot of good that's come out of it for us specifically, and probably all of you as well.
And for those of you who are parents yourselves, how has that impacted how you've been leading during this time?
I would say leading with empathy. I mean, it's when you have somebody walking in on your meeting, especially if you're trying to have lead a presentation or have a critical conversation. I think just it shows that we're all human, so it's impossible to kind of compartmentalize some things, and so I think that definitely just helps us lead with empathy and helps us be more understanding of the dynamics that are going on in our teams.
I agree, and just not just for our teams, but for ourselves. I think we're all in this fortunate position where we have the ability to address what is very much a systemic issue, not an individual issue. But we're not going to be able to do that if we don't have that same empathy towards and kindness towards ourselves and letting ourselves off the hook a little bit.
Great. Any other thoughts or any other comments, that you'd want to share for parents right now, or messages to them to, how to get through this time?
I think again is talking and having those groups so parents don't feel alone and overwhelmed. I think when you have the opportunity to share your story and learn about the stories of other people, that helps you ease your stress of your level of anxiety and ask for help. I think it's important that if you are in a situation that you're feeling that you are burnt out or you are depressed or you just feeling too much anxiety, just look for help.
Yeah, and a lot of employers like ours be starting these parent groups, and so there's been women's groups and there's been different infinity groups, but now there's parents groups. And I think if your company hasn't started one yet, I think it's definitely something you should explore. There's a great opportunity for parents just to connect with each other and just sometimes vent, sometimes share ideas, sometimes brainstorm, and sometimes just a reminder that you're not alone, or to share tips on things. It's a great resource that kind of feeds itself. So I think it's a low lift to be able to implement. And I think parents are getting a tremendous amount of value from it right now.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you all for joining today and for sharing these experiences. I think we've had some very valuable conversation. I'm just going to throw it back to Nick, and then we'll get started with our Q&A.
Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you guys for participating, that's you out there, in this webinar, which is Parents Under Pressure, How to Ensure Well-Being at the Time of Historic Stress. And also to our sponsor, Ovia Health. I've seen a few chat messages that are asking when this discussion will be available as an on-demand video. The answer is very soon, tomorrow. The link will be in the email that you get. It'll also have your SHRM and HRCI professional development credit info. Before we get back to the chat and the Q&A, which is coming up next, we have a ton of questions and we can always use more. So please submit your questions now. But before we do, I wanted to put in one more relentless and merciless plug for the surveys that we've been talking about, which I will drop right now into the chat one more time. They are on multi-generational workforces and HR leadership. And if you haven't gotten to them yet, we really, 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 really would love to hear from you. With all of that out of the way, right now, we're going to be taking your questions here for this panel from the audience. Caroline, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Nick. And yeah, like Nick said, if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A. I'll try to get to as many as possible. But the first one here, so this individual works at an EAP that serves teachers, the majority of whom are women, many who have young children. How would you recommend supporting them when they have no options for flexible schedules and have to show up in the classroom?
I feel like I'm in a unique situation here because we do have 30,000 teachers, but we also offer childcare. And so we offer a pretty heavy, childcare discount, always have. It's not anything new for us. So it's a little bit of a different situation. Working mothers in our centers get to bring their children to work with them, and they have that opportunity. And through pandemic, we popped up a virtual school setting for our school age kids, so they were even able to bring their school age kids. So I feel like I'm in a little bit of a unique situation that we're able to offer that to our employees, but it has been instrumental in keeping and retaining our teachers through pandemic, and allowing them to, feel connected and work and, get out of the house and have that extra support.
I would add too that if you don't have a benefit like whether it be KinderCare or Bright Horizons or Sitter City, if you don't have a benefit like that already, definitely that's something that companies should look into. Because I think there are some really great referral services for nannies or for home care. And there's even reimbursement options if you end up having like a neighbor or a pod, coming up with a creative solution to help watch your kids. Because I can imagine, especially with an EAP, if you are that counselor providing mental health support for an individual, it's not as easy as just having your kid on your lap or crash the mental health session. And I think that could be obviously very alarming and unprofessional in certain job types. So I think making sure that you have benefits for your employees and ways that they can access support for their kids, whether that be an activity that somebody can come in and lead in their home, or whether that be a drop-in care or backup care center, there's options for your families.
Thank you, Lisa, for plugging that. I can't believe I didn't go there. But yes, we offer backup care. We offer on-site. We have a tuition benefits program. But yeah, all of those things are available, and I think it's important.
I think during a session where when I talked about scarcity, and then you've got these things that are, what's the literature calls hassles, these daily challenges that have a cumulative impact on people, and it sounds like it's having an impact on your clients. Helping them work through those hassles and connecting them with resources. So being knowledgeable, I think, as Lisa pointed out, with things that are available in your community. Can they get some type of subsidy for child support? Can they find their state-run child referral system, childcare referral system, and connect them to that? Anything that you can do with them in that session to help them have an actionable plan to take after the session will help them just eliminate one more hassle and increase their bandwidth.
So I'm seeing a lot of questions in here specifically about flexibility for employees, or for how do you support employees and provide them with the tools they need and resources they need if they can't have a flexible schedule, like someone who might be an office worker who might be able to work from home all the time. I know, some of that touched on that, but I'm curious what everyone thinks about, the best way to address that.
I think offering, whether it be flex time off or offering modified work hours where possible. And if that's just not possible because somebody needs to be physically on site for X number of hours a day, then I think getting creative with those, the different parent solutions, whether they be backup childcare or referrals to nanny services or learning pods, or even community programs. I know the like the YMCA in our area has some amazing community support areas where for essential workers, you can actually have your kids go to a YMCA and have them supported for their distance learning. So there's community programs. I think employers shouldn't just assume that families are going to figure it out. I think the more we can provide referrals to different programs or services, or even ask our parents to share what they're doing, I think that's ways that we can help our workforce that that doesn't have the luxury of being able to work from home or work a flexible schedule.
For us, we've done a little bit of, shared schedules, right? So it works in some areas better than it does in others. And it really depends on if somebody is able to cut their salary, their pay in half. So there's a give and take there, but we've definitely explored that option as well. In addition to thinking just a little differently about our workforce, and not everybody can do that, but we do have, staff who only work 10 hours a week intentionally, to get some of the childcare opportunities, through KinderCare and work that way. But I think it's a matter of, I think we talked about it earlier, but talking to your workforce about what might work for them. I think it's a transparent conversation to be had. And to Lisa's point, don't assume they're going to figure it out, but also don't assume right, and push out something without really having that conversation and that transparency. I think it's a big part of the puzzle, and you might be able to find some, really cool, innovative ways to meet them where they are.
So this question, for working parents at home, are there any supports in place for those with children with special needs?
We do have a program that we offer. It's actually through our parent partner, and it specifically is geared at parents of children with special needs, because it's overwhelming for all parents. If you have a child that has a learning disability or a physical disability, it's next level challenging right now. And so I don't think we have this perfect, but in fact, I think there's still a lot of opportunity here. But I think offering extra mental health support for both parent and child and caregiver, but then also, which we do, and then we offer a program, and this is actually through our Bright Horizons partnership, but it is especially for parents of children with special needs. So it's special tutoring, special referral service to providers, and it has a series of webinars and education information for the parents and the family as well.
The other thing I would add is there are a lot of state and national resources out there if you're not offering something to your employees. It could be as simple as, creating a page and a link and showing them where to go. A lot of people are really stuck in that area. So I feel like, again, in a situation where, we offer this, on a daily basis, but really, making sure that some of those free resources are known and used. There are a lot of good ones out there that you can take advantage of as an employer, and just making those available and making them known could be a good way to kind of address that head on.
And just even marrying the last two questions of helping people with less flexibility, and then also additional behavioral health support for parents of kids with special needs. Ovia does offer digital health programs for parents of children with special needs that are specifically designed to be, engaged with digitally from the comfort of their homes. So we're happy to point you to some resources as well.
Great. How are you supporting employees with depression?
In our case, through the employee assistance program. And again, trying to have conferences. So we talk about depression, so people can share the stories. I think, again, if you hear a story of a coworker, it would be easier to understand that you're not alone, that you're not in this process struggling alone. And we encourage people, again, to use the EAP program.
We have a EAP program. We also have a resource that helps employees find a therapist. And because I think that's one of the feedback things we heard quite a bit is they just couldn't find somebody who was taking new patients who was in their area. So we have it's a match program where you can do a behavioral health assessment to identify what areas you have opportunity in, and then it can help match you with a therapist. One of the things that we also did this year, and it was really specifically to address what we've been seeing this past year, but we opened up our network for behavioral health, behavioral therapists. Before we had an in-network and out-of-network, and that out-of-network cost for a behavioral health therapist could be upwards of $200 per visit. And that really makes that service just not accessible to a lot of people. So opening up our network, so now there is no out-of-network, it's all one cost and it's covered at 90%. It's makes it much more accessible to employees. So help them find the therapist, help them make sure that that cost is something that's accessible, and then continue to promote and communicate and talk about the resources that are available and how they can be helpful.
One thing we do as well is not necessarily overestimate someone's ability to self-advocate and know that they have risk factors for depression, and not just depression, but also parental stress, anxiety. So that's one thing our program does is deliver those depression risk screeners. We actually did a peer-reviewed study presented at the American Psychiatric Association on that. We're identifying rates at 3 times the rate of at the clinical setting amongst people in the perinatal or parental well-being time period. So also I think it starts, we also do, point people to the resources, but it starts much earlier, where many people don't know their risk factors for depression, don't know that they're experiencing stress and anxiety. And it really needs to start much earlier on helping them seek not just mental health care at the point, but also the preventative care. How do we start those conversations?
In addition to all of the great things that others have talked about, I think that there's also an opportunity for ADA type accommodations. And there is a wonderful resource for that it's called JAN, the Job Accommodation Network. You go in and you can type in any disability type, and they have recommendations about accommodations you can make as an employer for that specific disability type. It's a great place to start with an employee who maybe is asking for an accommodation for something like depression, and then tweaking it and adjusting it to meet their specific needs.
This next question is also about mental health. So what about actual mental health days so people can practice self-care and mental health in the way that works for them?
I love that. We actually did a little bit of that on MLK Day, right? And we can't do it all the way down to our teacher workforce. So we provide some different opportunities for them, but in our corporate headquarters, we were able to, give people some time off to reflect and think about what's happening, in our country, in our world from a social unrest standpoint, and really just reflect and celebrate that day. We haven't done it a lot. We've only done it a few times to date, but we've gotten, lots of positive feedback on just allowing people, we call it feel the feels, right? Like feel their feelings, take some time without the guilt associated with it. And a lot of times, if you look up all of the research, I won't try to make it up, but all the research out there shows you that it can really increase productivity too. So it's a win-win. And it's a really important thing that we should all probably be considering in the HR world.
We've been doing them once a month since the onset of the pandemic, and we've invested in a lot of resources. And if you can imagine Ovia Health, it's one of those family-friendly places you could ever imagine working. Consistently, when we survey our team, the mental health days come out as the most appreciated benefit amidst the entire pandemic, because it's incredibly inclusive. It doesn't, the whole team is off. It's in addition to your, holiday schedule, vacation schedule, and the pressure is really off to really unplug and take that time for yourself that day.
One best practice that I've heard too is we have paid time off, so it's one bucket and you kind of use it just to how you see fit. But folks are not using their time off right now with everything going on. So one of the things that I personally do and I encourage others to do is I actually, instead of just putting PTO on my calendar when I'm off, I put on there that I'm taking a mental health day, or I'm taking a day off to be with my family, or I'm taking a day off to spend the day with my child because her school is closed. Like, I actually put that right on my calendar. So it's my PTO time. I can use it however, right? But it's just making it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more just a reminder that take a mental health day. You absolutely deserve it and you should do it. And the more that we can make that accessible by leading by example, it just helps people think like, oh yeah, I could do that too, or I should be doing that. And I don't have to put it on my calendar if I'm not comfortable with that, but it's just in that back of my mind, like I can use that PTO day just to go take a walk in a park if that's what I need to do.
We have another question on flexibility, and this is an interesting one. How do you manage flexibility when you have people in different time zones?
It's hard. I just moved from Portland, Oregon to Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm telling you, our headquarters are based out of Portland, Oregon, and the shift in time zone has been eye-opening for me, for my poor East Coasters who didn't have me as an advocate until now. And I think it is a balance and it is a flexibility issue, but it's also a matter of respect and building a culture of respect. And we're introducing some new ideas and piloting them across the organization. One of them is called a meeting time zone. So how are we scheduling meetings within the hours of noon to 5 East Coast time, which is, people then have time to do their work in the day, right? And outside of those kind of cross-functional team meeting time zone, you can have your one-on-ones, you can do some of your other leadership work. But it's been a really interesting situation. And I heard Diana talking about it earlier. It's tough, right? So it is a balance. One of the ways that I've personally been handling it, which I love, is the mornings are amazing, right? Because up until 10 or 11, like nobody's even awake. So just making sure that you're taking time on either end of the day to really, think about how you're self-caring and how you're setting an example for your team and for the organization through that as well. But I would love any other ideas you have, because it is definitely a challenge.
I think this is where meeting effectiveness really is critical, like making sure that you're assessing your meetings and only inviting the people that need to attend. If you want to have a whole bunch of people listen in, then make sure that you put that right clear in the agenda. Here's who absolutely needs to be there, here's who can listen in, and we're going to send a link out afterwards for you to listen after. So making recordings available, making notes available, and really putting clear objectives for what is the intended outcome, what is the scope of the meeting, and who is needed as decision makers. The more we can clarify that up front, I think that really helps, because we've always had workforce spread all over the place, and now it's even more so. So certainly trying to have meetings within a certain window that makes it reasonable, but when you have teams in India and in San Francisco and everywhere in between, there's really no ideal time. So just really carving it down to those who really need to participate and making sure that you're doing your due diligence to follow up with notes and recaps after the fact, and not expecting a response to every email. I think giving a 24-hour window minimum for people to respond, because that's been the other thing is, send out a last minute, I need your response by this time. Well, if it's already 8 p.m. for our folks in Europe, they're not going to be responding to that email until tomorrow. So being mindful and not ever expecting things to have that tight of a turnaround is really critical too.
And I will add, it's also important to respect public holidays in different countries.
Yeah.
Because maybe in your country it's not a holiday, but it is a very important holiday in India. So again, we have 200 offices around the world, so we are mindful on that aspect.
All right, this next one is about wellness programs specifically. So how do you balance seeking engagement from all employees in wellness programs versus giving flexibility to attend or not attend events?
I mean, we give them the flexibility. We encourage people to attend, but I think with so many things going on, we can't expect, I mean, everybody to attend. A lot of them take advantage of it, but talking about flexibility, you have to be flexible. Some people will be able to join, some people will not.
I would say that I would just ditto that, right? Like we have really great turnout because people want to feel connected, but we're not going to force anybody to have fun together. So, you know, really, really thinking about the flexibility in it. I think there is, again, I know I sound like a parrot at this point, but getting senior leadership involved is a really important piece of how you can encourage people to attend some of these things that are good for mental health or are good for connectedness. So just really getting your senior leadership involved and making sure they're visible at some of these events could help with participation.
Also rethink how you're looking at your engagement metrics, because a lot of traditional program engagement metrics are based on when people sign up, when they attend, when they engage. But opening that up, like what does good look like to you? Like what does engagement look like? Because to me personally, it's not important whether somebody attends live or if they watch it at 2 a.m, 2 weeks later. It's really, did you provide content that was useful to somebody when they needed it? So making sure that your utilization of your engagement metrics can capture when somebody is accessing that content.
Our wellness team is doing amazing things that they're flexible, just like everyone is saying here. And they have created wellness activities that people can engage in for incentive, and it crosses a spectrum of different wellness areas. So one is finance, one is physical wellness and exercise, and one is nutrition. And then there's a bunch of different activities that are offered at various times, some that are just recorded so you can do them at any time, and people can pick the things that are meaningful and will make the most difference for their lives.
Great. So how would you scale some of the programming that we've all talked about to a smaller organization?
I will ask them what they need. I think it's important to know when you're working in a small organization, you want to maximize the returns. So ask people what they need. If what they need is a mental health program, or they need more leisure activities, or they need a day off, or they need, sometimes we think with what people know, but I think having that conversation and adhering your programs of what your population needs, I think that's the best use of your money.
And I think supervisors end up needing to wear more than one hat, different from how they would in a larger organization where they can focus on one thing. Supervisors in smaller organizations need to know about EAP and how to make connections, some things that maybe they would normally in a larger organization hand off to a human resource function. I think leaders need to be right there in the middle of things and be aware of what resources are available to their employees.
So this person says, I have a handful of employees who are working from home and we want to bring them back. They have children who are still doing distance learning. What is a good approach to take? What is a good approach to take toward bringing them back in?
I think as all companies are starting to grapple with this, I think we need to ask some hard questions as why do we want them back? Why do we need them back and physically back in the space? I mean, I think we have to look at retaining the employee as being a critical factor. And there are certainly some areas I know where if you define that role as being an in-person role, that employee is going to leave your company. So I think companies need to really assess where where the needs are. And is it more critical to have that employee physically in an office than to retain the employee with the company? I think those are hard questions we really need to look at. And I also think a phased approach. I do think there are still many schools that are fully remote or some hybrid version, and that will likely continue for the next year. So if your goal is to have all of your employees physically in an office, set a time for when that makes sense. And so maybe that's March 2022, you want to have everybody physically in the office. Then if that is critical for the culture for your work group, set that goal in the future and then work with your families on what they need to get there. But I think expecting everybody to physically be able to come back to an office today is not a realistic expectation. And if that is critical for your work group, then you need to expect some fallout from that.
So this next one is, with family dynamics being what they are and families looking less like the nuclear family, what can employers do to support mature workers who are raising their grandchildren?
I love that question. And I think it's really what we've been talking about with flexibility, with really asking what your parents need. Because yeah, families, there is no one size family anymore. They look very different and they function very different and their needs are very different. And so whether that's the 20-year-old mother or the 60-year-old mother or the 70-year-old grandmother, I think we just need to be asking what our parents need and have policies and programs that are flexible enough to meet them where they are. I definitely also think that some of our benefit programs and our healthcare programs, the language needs to be re-looked at. So we're not enforcing heteronormative nuclear family dynamics in order to access healthcare or in order to access fertility benefits or even mental health benefits. So I think really looking at the fine print in some of our plan documents to ensure that we don't have that restricted language in there. And then making sure that our programs are flexible enough to support all of our caregiving needs.
Do you have any toolkits or resources for HR teams looking to get an affinity group started? How do you get this going from scratch?
I think it starts from senior management. I think when you have your senior management committed to the initiative, then you can start rolling out. I think people are very eager to participate in affinity groups. I just think you just have to have some guidelines, but you start small and understand that you will make some mistakes in the beginning, but it's trial and error, and just start. I think if you start with one group, then another group will come out and another group will add. But I think when you have your senior leadership talking to your people and saying that is something that they're willing to support, I think the road is easier from there.
Ovia also has a parenting resource getting started guide that we're happy to distribute to anyone who might be interested in. It's a resource toolkit for just getting one off the legs at your organization. And we've helped quite a few organizations get those parents groups started.
There's also a group called Mindshare Partners that you can find just by Googling them. They have some great tools if you want to get an employee group around mental health. So if you actually want a mental health infinity group, because that is one that I think a lot of companies can really benefit from, but it does have a lot of nuances that you've got to be aware of. So definitely that's one that provides some toolkits as well. And I think also looking at the demographics of your teams, because making sure that you have infinity groups that meet the demographics of your team. So if you have a high vet population, then having a veteran infinity group would be a fantastic way for them to connect. If you have a very young group, having, it's just, I think, checking in with your teams, making sure that you're design the affinity groups that they actually want to participate in, and then leveraging peers in your industry or companies in your area that have them. You can gain a lot of insights from people who have already done it.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is, no, I don't have a toolkit to share. However, I do think, it's really important to talk to your team, understand like your employee base on what affinity group to start with. The other thing I would recommend is really cater it to your organization culturally, right? Like we've tried to start doing that in a new and different way. And I think it's important that it meet the needs of your employee base. And you can start with a framework. I love, Gina, that you have some of that stuff available, and really think about like how it applies to your organization versus just, popping something up like everybody else.
Great. Well, thank you all again for your time. I really appreciate it. Really interesting discussion. I'm going to pass it back to Nick for now to close us out.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Caroline. Thanks for hosting. Thanks to all of you guys for speaking. And thanks to everyone who participated. That was an amazing conversation. Thanks again to our sponsor, Ovia Health, and to you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website. That's fromday1.co, fromdayone.co. Check out some of our upcoming webinars and our virtual conferences. Speaking of those, on Thursday, March 18th, that's 2 days from now, we have one called On-Demand Pay in a Responsible Way. It's a great benefits conversation. And on Wednesday, March 24th, we'll be doing our monthly full-scale virtual conference. These contain panel discussions, workshops, networking, chat rooms, workshop stuff. It's the focus this month is how to build authentic leaders, the role of HR. You can visit our website. Once again, that's fromdayone.co, fromdayone.co to learn more. Thank you so much for participating today, and stay healthy out there.